4 years ago. No, I'm sorry, 2 years ago, adjuncts were able to be accreted into the unit. It was a very hard fight, it took 3 years. There was a lot of divisions among the faculty, which is what Temple, encouraged, and they were, with some people and some departments, very successful, and these are things that we're still trying to get over. It took us 15 months to negotiate our first contract for adjuncts. In that contract, we were able to actually achieve gains for the full-time faculty who we were not even negotiating for. And in doing that, ended up with an agreement that was very helpful in terms of bringing solidarity to our union. We're at a point right now where I believe a lot of full-time faculty are recognizing that it really is the adjuncts who are doing the work. Right now, we're really, we fought to organize, we are a force, and we're turning this into a different type of union, and I think people recognize the necessity of that. I think they also recognize that we could be fighting for each other, that we don't necessarily, just because, we didn't have to agree to anything, any kind of language regarding full-time faculty. And we ended up with a deal that was actually really kind of beautiful for everyone. So we're trying now, because we have to negotiate in the spring as a full unit for everybody. We're really trying to build on this kind of solidarity. And we know that there are going to be places where there will be rough spots, but anyway, these are the sorts of issues that we're dealing with. And I want to introduce to you our panelists today. So to my left is Deirdre Nelms, who is a PhD student in philosophy from Georgetown University, and she works as a teaching associate and is a kick-ass member of DeGezelle. Melissa DeGezelle is an adjunct at Temple University at Jefferson, which used to be Philadelphia U, and the Community College of Philly, and she's been serving in all kinds of ways in TAP, with UAP from the very beginning. And Lisa Laverty, who I finally met, we've been Facebook friends for a very long time, is an organizer with the Georgetown Alliance of Graduate Employees and is a former president of the Eastern Michigan University of Teachers, Federation of Teachers, a non-tenured higher ed local. So we wanted on this panel to have a grad local, a wall-to-wall local represented, and just an all-contingent local represented. And I think I'm just going to read from here, and then we'll get started. So basically, we're going to focus on one question, which is, what has your experience been with your colleagues on campus, with your institution, and with students as a contingent person? And we want to focus on how people relate to each other on campus, different levels of relationships between colleagues, relationships that are hierarchical, where one group might fear the other, how being contingent creates barriers in relationships, and examples of how that has been dealt with, what contingent faculty have to offer to colleagues, students in our institutions, and the difficulties in building relationships and building strong communities. So those are the sorts of things we want to focus on. Melissa, you want to open up responding to those questions? There you go.
So I think what I'll talk mostly about are students. This past year, I taught a 7-7-2 load. I'm at the tail end of my summer one, which is 2 classes. So I haven't had many organizing conversations with faculty quite as much as I have with students, unless I bump into somebody. So yeah, 400 students in this past year was a lot. And so the thing that I keep thinking of is that and I feel like this is really unpopular, but I kind of love being contingent. I know all of the problems with it, but I don't know that I would have the awareness and the consciousness that I do in the classroom if I weren't contingent. And I, you know, in talking to students and thinking and writing, thinking about this word professionalism and how maybe it is a roadblock. I know that we're professionals and that's fine if we want to be seen as professionals, but I find that with students, like, the work really gets done when I'm not a professional and where we can see each other on the same team. And I don't think that they are often able to do that. They see the teacher as this person who, you know, has this power and gives them the grade and banks information into their brains, whether they agree or not. And I don't know. I'm not sure that that's working. So yeah, my organizing maybe looks a little bit different from other people. And I'm lucky because I get to teach social justice. I teach writing, I teach humanities, I teach American social justice. You know, last week we were on Marx and Fanon and, you know, Freire. So it's built into my classes where we talk about contingency. You can also teach it in math too. We have Max Abner, who was at Temple for a while, talks a lot about, you know, you can talk about conditions in a math problem, and so it can always come in. So right off the bat, when I'm talking with students, you know, first week and we're going over the syllabus, I get down to the office and I say, oh, you can see that, like, in my office hours, I'll be at any number of these rooms because I don't have an office. And that's where that conversation starts right away. We go into it. They have lots of questions. They've never heard of that term, contingent or adjunct, and it really opens up the room so that, you know, and it's honest. I can say, like, hey, I'm poor too, and hey, I'm really scared too, and that, you know, I mean, which is problematic sometimes, but it gives them the opportunity to connect in ways. I also really want them to get angry. Like, I think that if we're getting any work done, like, it's good to come from that place of anger and then figure out how to build relationships and actually get something done. And also how they navigate the university, how they think of that classroom, how they think of me, you know, teaching 6 other classes, being a single parent, working other jobs on top of that. How, you know, it might take me a little while to get back through email, how another professor might be that same way, how much money they're paying and what they're getting out of that. So when we organize students, they then tend to actually organize their other teachers. I've seen it happen over and over where somebody will, you know, a student will come to me and say, like, oh, we got into this conversation in our classroom, and I said, oh, I have this other adjunct, you know, teacher. Little do they know it's over half of their teachers who are adjuncts. At my other school, I think at Jefferson, it's like 80% adjunct or something. So we are 51%-ish here.
One adjunct and then another 15 NTT.
Okay, yeah.
75% contingent.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm a little all over the place. I have lots of notes here, but they organize each other, they organize their teachers, they organize their parents, and then that community is built, that it's not just us as contingent faculty against the university, it is now students who have something at stake as well. What are they, you know, what is it that they are missing through our conditions, through us working in our conditions? So a couple little stories. I had a student, my cell phone broke. I couldn't afford to fix it. I just, you know, set it on social media, and lo and behold, it was a former student who said, "Hey, here, take my old phone." That, you know, that's like that community building that happens. Another student, while we were while we were in a campaign a couple years ago, there was, there were speakers, and there was a student of mine whose politics were very different than mine in union politics. And I remember he signed the support, signed in support, and he said to me, it's because you talked to us about this in class. Then there was more conversation to be had, that it's not just about me, that it's, all workers, and that, it's all connected. But that really, I think, solidified it for me, that someone whose politics were so different saw that this was necessary. And just to sort of wrap up, to go back to this not contingent, or this idea that I sort of love being contingent, and that's not very popular, and it relates to what Jenny said, that the contingency is what keeps us in the struggle. That, this past year I had a really temporary full-time gig, and I noticed the differences. I noticed being in that full-time temporary NTT gig that I changed a little bit, that I laughed at the really unethical jokes that my boss was saying, and so I had to keep reflecting and keep pulling myself back to stay on target to what really mattered. I'll end there.
Thanks. Lisa or Deirdre?
Hi. So first I'm going to talk just a little bit about what's happening at Georgetown now. We've been organizing for 3 years, 2 years with AFT, and we will hopefully have an election in the fall. We recently achieved an election agreement after originally not being voluntarily recognized. We're going outside of the NLRB, which is really exciting, and we hope that other graduate unions are going to be able to do that. So I'm going to start talking about my relationship with students first. I think Georgetown students are awesome. Definitely something that shaped our organizing experience was the product of student organizing long before us with the just employment policy. Georgetown is a Catholic university, so there's a lot of Catholic rhetoric that we can hold them to. The Pope is very into unions, and so it's very hypocritical for them to be anti-union in their own rhetoric. So my experience with students has been incredibly positive, both in the classroom and as an organizer. When I talk to students in my capacity as an organizer, they're so enthusiastic. Some of them have, thump their hands down on the table and be like, okay, when are you guys going on strike? When's the work slow down? And we're just like, that enthusiasm is great. You maybe don't understand the organizing realities in the same way that we do, but the enthusiasm has been really exciting. In the classroom, I think that students also don't see a principled distinction between tenured faculty, between adjuncts, and between graduate students who are designing and teaching their own classes. I really don't think that they do. I think once you're in the classroom, you shape their experience, and they respond with respect and interest, regardless of what your job title is. Most of them aren't really aware of those distinctions. So I really have, I've designed my own classes. I'm starting to design my own classes. I've co-taught classes, and I feel like I'm responsible too as a teacher. Being contingent mostly affects graduate students in the summer. There's kind of a running joke that during the summer it's like the Hunger Games, where graduate students are competing with one another a little bit. We're trying to not get our classes canceled. Often our classes are canceled with very little notice, which is jarring because we rely on that income. So I think that experience has really helped us connect with adjuncts on campus who are organized with SCAU 500. Adjuncts have been incredibly supportive. They unionized, I believe, in 2015. And don't always have the capacity to help us a lot because they're dealing with their own issues right now. But we definitely feel their support. I think where it gets trickier for graduate students is the relationship between tenured faculty, because we have to fight to even define ourselves as contingent faculty. With to some of our professors, they really want to emphasize that we are their mentees. And while that's definitely true, we have mentors on our committees, we rely on faculty members to advance our careers in our capacity as PhD students. Sometimes we have to struggle to convince tenured faculty members that we're also their colleagues and that we're teaching a lot of classes, that we're not paid the same to do really the same work. We design our own classes from beginning to end. We teach unsupervised, a lot of us, by our third year. So we've had mixed experiences with our tenured faculty colleagues. So some of that has been bad. Some of them have kind of fought the student employee label and have insisted that we're students first and that we're not employees or that we're employees second. But we have also had quite a lot of faculty support. A lot of faculty members have been open with their students about their own experiences in unions, either as graduate students or as adjuncts or in previous positions. Some faculty members have taken to Twitter. They've been really, really vocal advocates. They've written articles for us. And I think I'll just wrap up with an action that I thought was really exciting, where a group of us kind of went to the president's office with a petition, and we presented an inter-union front. So we had a tenured faculty member there in support with us who showed up in person. We had an adjunct with SEIU 500 show up, and then we also had students, and we included folks who are unionized in facilities and the food service staff. So we had all these unions. We had Unite Here, SEIU. We all just marched together uninvited to the president's office and said, you know, this is what union solidarity and interaction should look like on the college campus.
And I have to say that was a pretty exciting moment. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the experience of contingency institutionally on campus. And just as very brief background, the local that I come out of, which Alyssa was our staff rep for a very long time, and we learned a lot about building power from her. But that local started out as a non-tenure but full-time non-tenure only local, because at the time that we organized, that was all that state law would allow. And some years later, interpretation of state law changed, and we were able to add our adjunct colleagues into that local. So when we talk about how we experience contingency, I guess I can kind of see it both from contingent faculty and a university administrative perspective, but also contingent faculty and how we sometimes look at each other, right? The experience I think that administrators want us to have is one of division, of diminution, and of isolation. And when I think about our own local, my own former local's experiences, for example, when we began to organize with our adjunct colleagues to bring them in, there was a point at which the university said to us, well, they, the adjuncts, they're not like you, the other non-tenure faculty on campus. They, the adjuncts, are only here for a nice time and a little bit of pocket money. Proving once again that management is almost always the best organizer. Right? That upset people. So, you know, othering ourselves from each other is an administrative tactic, and I think it's one that contingent faculty experience in lots and lots of ways. We experienced it in the bargaining room when management told us that we shouldn't have access to the library because contingent faculty might steal the books. Yeah, it was fun. And we experienced it with our tenured track colleagues early on when they began to say things somewhat publicly about us not being quote unquote real faculty, right? So there are lots of ways in which this serves the university's interest. It didn't serve our interests, of course. It didn't serve our colleagues' interests in other status lines on campus in the long term. It certainly didn't serve our students' interests as people who wanted to get a good education and shouldn't have to try to figure out maybe how to navigate all these differences. But it certainly served management's interests. And it served their interests in other ways too, in terms of just physically taking space and resources on campus. As you said, many adjunct faculty don't have office space, don't have access to copying and printing resources and other tools that we need to do our jobs. And so when we think about our student experience, of course that affects our students too. But I think also this hierarchy, which I think academia sort of socializes us into, right? This hierarchy filters down into how we think about ourselves. And so I want to talk a little bit about when we were making the decision to bring our adjunct colleagues in to an existing unit of non-tenure but full-time faculty. We were a very, very small unit. There were only about 100 non-tenure faculty full-time faculty members on our campus. We were less than 10% of the total instructional staff, and we taught a little under 10% of the courses on our campus. To be very blunt, we had no power. We were also afraid of everything. And in fact, at one point when the tenure track faculty went on strike, the then leadership of our locals' official public slogan was that we were quietly working with our heads down. I cringe, right? So we didn't have any power. And we knew that, and we knew that in order to be able to affect change on our campus for ourselves and others and our students, we needed allies. But even so, there was a lot of uncertainty and skepticism among my own full-time non-tenure members about whether we should make common cause with adjuncts. Questions about, are they like us? Are they dedicated professionals? Will they even be here? Do they understand what we do? I mean, those came from contingent faculty looking at other contingent faculty. And I think that's not an uncommon experience in our movement, right? Because we want to reproduce hierarchy and we want to reproduce status. But it doesn't serve our interests to do that. We did a lot of soul searching. And as Jenny said, I think at TAUP, we had to really think very carefully about, so how do we overcome those differences? How do we find common ground? How do we understand each other? And when we do that, what it really means is we have to talk to each other, right? We have to learn about each other. We have to come to the realization that we share the common interests in the work that we're doing, and that in fact, we want to serve those interests, not administration interests. I have to say, we worked very hard to bargain contracts that benefited everybody. We worked very hard to create internal structures that allowed everybody to have a voice. But that work doesn't happen overnight, and it has to be very intentional. So when we think about our relationships to institutions, but also our relationships to each other, whether it's tenure line and non-tenure line, or part-time and full-time, or grads and adjuncts, or whatever it may be, I think we have to be really, really intentional about not reproducing those divisions, those barriers, and that isolation that serves management, but not us. That's what I'll say.
Thank you, everybody. So, and some great examples of working with students, the kind of value that we have for them, how they, how we work together with them, the kinds of ways that we relate to each other, both in positive and negative ways, how different groups of people have come together and fought with each other. We wanted to spend a little bit of time, the rest of our time is actually going to be in table discussions, and